The Montana sky stretched endless and blue above Ridgeline 7, the kind of blue that made men believe in heaven and second chances. 47 of the world's finest marksmen stood in a silent semicircle around the 1,000-meter firing line, watching a woman they didn't know aim a rifle that looked like it had survived 3 wars and lost all of them. Captain Sierra Wolf's rifle bore no scope, no laser rangefinder, no wind sensor or ballistic computer, just iron sights, simple mechanical posts of steel that most modern shooters had never trained with and fewer still trusted at distances beyond 300 meters. She was preparing to fire at 1,500 meters, half a mile, a distance where even the rotation of the Earth became a factor that serious long-range shooters had to account for. The range officer, a retired Marine gunnery sergeant with 30 years of competition experience, cleared his throat. Shooter ready. Sierra nodded once, a single economical movement that wasted no energy. You may fire when ready. She settled into position, her breathing slowed, her heart rate dropped. The iron sights aligned on a target so distant it appeared as nothing more than a dark smudge against the pale dirt of the backstop. The front sight post covered more of the target than it revealed. Everything had to be perfect. Position, breathing, trigger control, wind reading. A dozen other factors that separated expert shooters from everyone else. The crowd held its breath. Sierra's finger began to take up slack on the trigger. And the world froze. 96 hours earlier, in a place that didn't exist on any map accessible to civilians, Captain Sierra Wolf was running for her life. The combat operation had gone sideways in the way that only operations in denied territories could go sideways. Hard, fast, with bullets cracking through air that smelled like burning diesel and human fear. Sierra moved through the ruins of what had once been a municipal building in a city she couldn't name, in a country she wasn't authorized to discuss, on a mission that would never appear in any official record. Her rifle scope exploded. Not from where, not from accident. A hostile sniper had targeted her specifically, putting a round through her optic at a distance that suggested professional training and intimate knowledge of American Tier 1 operating procedures. The scope disintegrated into fragments of glass and aluminum. Shrapnel peppered her face. Blood ran warm down her cheek. Contact right. I'm hit. Sergeant Danny Reeves, 24 years old and on his second deployment with the unit, went down hard behind a collapsed section of concrete wall. Enemy fire had found him while he was covering her movement. Sierra dropped flat. Return fire erupted from her team's positions. The distinctive crack of American M4 carbines mixed with the heavier reports of hostile AK pattern rifles. Smoke drifted thick and acrid through the shattered building. She low-crawled to Reeves. His leg was bleeding but not arterial, survivable if they could extract in the next 10 minutes, lethal if they stayed pinned. "Can you move?" she had to shout over the gunfire. "Not fast enough, Cap." His face was pale, shock setting in. Sierra made a decision that would define everything that followed. She removed the destroyed scope from her rifle with quick practiced movements. The iron sights, backup equipment that most operators never touched, flipped up into position. Simple, mechanical, indestructible. 3 hostile fighters were advancing through the building's eastern approach. She could hear their boots on broken tile, 30 meters and closing. They thought the Americans were blind without optics. They thought wrong. The iron sights aligned. Front post centered on the rear aperture. Target acquired through smoke and shadow at 28 meters. She fired. The first hostile dropped. She shifted. Fired. The second hostile went down. The third broke and ran. "Reeves on me. We're moving now." She got him up. Got him moving. The team rallied and fought their way to the extraction point through a running gunfight that seemed to last hours but measured only 8 minutes on her watch. Apache gunships arrived and turned the night into thunder and fire. They made it out, all of them, because Sierra Wolf could shoot with iron sights at distances and in conditions that would have left other operators helpless. On the helicopter ride back to base, Reeves gripped her arm with a hand that still shook from adrenaline and blood loss. "Cap, you saved my ass with irons. How?" Sierra stared out at darkness broken only by the glow of distant fires. Old training, old mentor, old promises. He wanted to ask more. She could see it in his eyes, but he was smart enough to recognize when a door was closed and locked. 48 hours after that firefight, Sierra stood in her unit commander's office, still wearing the same desert tan combat uniform, still carrying the faint smell of gunpowder and smoke that no amount of washing could completely remove. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Morrison, a man who'd seen more classified operations than most people saw sunrises, looked at her across a desk covered in maps and mission folders. 36-hour leave, Montana General's orders. Sierra's eyebrows rose slightly, the closest she ever came to showing surprise. "What competition, sir?" "Sovereign Defense International, civilian shooting competition, high profile, big names." Morrison slid a folder across the desk. "You're not competing, you're observing. Orders from JSOC. Joint Special Operations Command didn't send operators to shooting competitions for fun." Sierra opened the folder. Inside was a single page, a brief, and a name she recognized. General Raymond Hale, the man who'd trained her, the man who'd turned her from a decent shooter into one of the deadliest precision marksmen in American special operations. Morrison continued, "There's a classified envelope. You open it when you arrive, not before. Transportation's arranged. You leave in 3 hours." "Sir, I just came off a combat rotation. My gear's damaged. I don't have competition equipment." "Use what you have. That's the point." Morrison's expression suggested he knew more than he was saying, which was standard for Special Operations Command. "General Hale specifically requested you, with your current equipment status. Make of that what you will." Sierra made plenty of it, none of it comforting. Fort Patterson, Montana, sat in high country where the air was thin and clean, and the mountains cut sharp silhouettes against evening skies that looked like they'd been painted by someone who believed in God. The Sovereign Defense International Sniper Competition drew shooters from 12 countries, military representatives, elite police units, civilian champions with custom rifles that cost more than most people's annual salary. Sierra arrived in a rental truck that had seen better years, carrying a rifle case that had seen worse wars. The registration building was modern glass and steel, a corporate veneer over what was essentially a military training facility. Inside, competitors milled around tables covered in documentation and equipment catalogs. The air hummed with that particular frequency of competitive tension mixed with professional respect. She checked in at the main desk. The official, a woman in her 30s with the efficient manner of someone who'd processed hundreds of competitors, scanned Sierra's identification. "Captain Wolf, active duty, we have you registered." She glanced at the rifle case. "Will you be using issued optics or personal equipment?" "Personal equipment." "Very good. Please proceed to Equipment Inspection Station 3. Station 3 was manned by Colonel James Riker, a man whose weathered face and iron-gray hair spoke of decades in uniform. His service dated back to Desert Storm, the first Gulf War, where he'd earned his first Purple Heart. His eyes, however, were cold, evaluating, assessing every competitor like a threat to be neutralized. Sierra set her case on the inspection table and opened it. Riker's expression shifted subtly when he saw the rifle. Standard military issue. Well-maintained but clearly field-used. And the scope, cracked through the objective lens, held together with grip tape. "Captain," Riker's voice carried the flat affect of command. "Your optic is combat damaged. You're authorized to withdraw. No penalty. Equipment failure is legitimate grounds." "Scope's not necessary for what I need, sir." "This is a precision competition. Longest target is 1,500 meters. You planning to shoot that with iron sights?" "Yes, sir." Riker studied her for a long moment. Other competitors nearby had stopped their conversations to watch. A woman planning to compete at international level with backup sights. Either she was delusional or dangerous. The line between the two was sometimes thinner than people realized. "You have documentation authorizing your participation." Sierra handed him a sealed envelope. Official JSOC letterhead. Riker opened it, read briefly, and his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Whatever the letter said, it overrode his authority to refuse her entry. "You're cleared to compete." He closed the envelope and returned it. "But understand, Captain, this competition has standards. If your equipment proves inadequate, you'll be withdrawn. Is that clear?" "Crystal, sir." She moved away from inspection toward the competitor's staging area, aware of eyes following her. Assessing, judging, dismissing. Let them. Underestimation was a weapon she'd learned to wield with the same precision she applied to shooting. In the bathroom, alone, she opened the second envelope. The classified one. General Hale's handwriting, sharp and economical as the man himself. "Sierra, you will compete. You will use iron sights. You will not win. You will identify the asset. Code designation Iron Cross. This individual is selling classified Tier 1 training protocols to foreign interests. Buyer will be present to verify capability before payment. Identify. Confirm. Report. If circumstances require direct action, you are authorized. Destroy this message." She burned it in the sink, watched the paper curl and blacken and turn to ash that she washed down the drain with water that ran cold and clear. Then she returned to the staging area with a different set of priorities than every other competitor in the building. They were here to win. She was here to hunt. The practice range opened at 1,400 hours. 47 shooters, the full roster, spread across firing lanes with equipment that represented the cutting edge of precision shooting technology. German optics with computer-assisted ballistic solutions. American-made rifles with carbon fiber barrels and chassis systems designed by aerospace engineers. Every advantage that money and technology could provide. Sierra's rifle looked like a museum piece by comparison. Basic, functional, brutally simple. She claimed Lane 17 and began the methodical process of establishing zero for her iron sights. This wasn't about showing off. This was about creating a cover story. A competitor serious enough to practice, not serious enough to win. Exactly the profile that would let her observe without drawing excessive attention. At 300 meters, she fired a 5-shot group. Tight, centered, but not exceptional. Plenty of other shooters were putting rounds into smaller clusters. At 600 meters, the real work began. At this distance, iron sights required absolute fundamentals. Any flaw in technique was magnified. She settled into position and fired. 5 rounds, 4 center mass, 1 called flyer to the left. Good, not great, perfect for her purposes. A voice spoke from behind her, accented, Russian, cold. "You shoot better than that, I can tell." Sierra turned. The man was late 30s, athletic build, with the kind of neutral expression that suggested either deep calm or complete indifference to human life. Alexei Sokolov, according to his name tag. Russian Federation representative. Good enough for day one, Sierra replied. Sokolov smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Yes, day one. He walked away without further comment. Another shooter approached as Sierra was packing her rifle. This one younger, mid-30s, with the easy confidence of someone who'd never failed at anything important. Canadian flag patch on his gear bag. Marcus Kane, according to his tag. JTF-2. Canadian Special Operations. You're Delta, right? Kane's tone was friendly, too friendly. I can tell by the way you move. Classified. Fair enough. I worked with Delta in 18. Mosul. Never saw a female operator there. Then you didn't work with the right people. Kane's expression shifted slightly. Recognition or suspicion, Sierra couldn't tell which. Well, good luck tomorrow. That's some old-school equipment you're running. Old school still works if you know how to use it. She left him standing there, aware that she just had two conversations that weren't really about shooting. Sokolov probing, Kane testing, both of them seeing something in her that went beyond a competitor with damaged gear. The mandatory competitor briefing started at 1800 hours in the main conference hall. Colonel Riker stood at the front, backlit by a projection screen showing the competition schedule and scoring system. 47 shooters filled the seats. The tension in the room was palpable. $75,000 in prize money. International bragging rights. Careers enhanced or damaged based on performance. But Riker wasn't talking about prizes. He was talking about security. 2 weeks ago, a lone sniper killed 2 military contractors in Wyoming. Long range, single shots, no witnesses. Both victims were former special operations trainers. He clicked to crime scene photos, professional hits, clean, efficient. We've implemented additional security measures, armed guards, perimeter patrols. Anyone sees anything unusual, report immediately. Sierra studied the photos. The kill shots were textbook, center mass, no follow-up needed. Whoever made these shots knew exactly what they were doing, and they'd chosen targets with specific knowledge, trainers, people who taught others how to shoot. Dr. Elena Cross, listed as a DARPA observer studying performance optimization, sat 3 rows ahead. She was making notes on a tablet. Too many notes for someone just watching a security briefing. After the briefing, competitors dispersed to the hospitality area. Coffee and conversation. The social component of competition that Sierra generally avoided. But tonight she needed to observe. Needed to identify which of these 46 shooters might be code name Iron Cross. She positioned herself near the coffee station. Good vantage point. Could see most of the room, could overhear multiple conversations. Sokolov stood with a group of Eastern European shooters, speaking Russian. Sierra's language training let her catch fragments, nothing operational, just shop talk about rifles and ammunition. Kane was alone, reviewing a data book, making notes, glancing up occasionally to scan the room, looking for something or someone. Dr. Cross approached Sierra directly. Captain Wolf, Elena Cross, DARPA. I'm studying performance optimization in high-stress scenarios. Would you be willing to participate in a brief survey? What kind of survey? Psychological baseline. How shooters manage stress. Maintain focus. Your choice of iron sights despite available alternatives suggests interesting decision-making processes. Sierra smiled politely. I'll pass, thanks. The study is voluntary, but DARPA would appreciate military cooperation. I'm here to shoot, not be studied. Cross's expression remained professionally neutral, but something in her eyes suggested she wasn't used to being refused. Of course. If you change your mind, I'm in Building C, Office 12. She walked away. Sierra watched her go. DARPA studying shooters at a civilian competition. Possible, but the timing felt convenient. Too many federal agencies taking sudden interest in an event that had run successfully for 8 years without incident. The crowd was thinning, shooters heading back to billeting to rest before tomorrow's early start. Sierra was about to leave when the lights went out. Complete darkness for 3 seconds. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in dim red glow. Then main power restored. Electrical fault, someone said. Old building. But Sierra had counted the timing. 3 seconds. Exactly long enough for someone to move through a doorway unobserved, to plant something, to retrieve something, to send a signal. She was the first one out the door, moving fast toward the parking area. If someone had used that darkness for operational purposes, they'd need to exfil quickly. Most of the competitors' vehicles were parked in the main lot, but she'd noticed a secondary lot for staff. She reached it in time to see taillights, a vehicle leaving, too far to identify make or model, but definitely leaving in a hurry right after a convenient power outage. Sierra committed the timing to memory and headed back to her billeting. Room 14 in Building B Spartan. Single bed, desk, bathroom. Everything a soldier needed and nothing more. She locked the door and checked the room thoroughly. No listening devices, no tampering, but she still wedged a chair under the doorknob. Old habits from deployments where threats came from unexpected directions. At 2300 hours, lying in darkness and trying to force her mind toward sleep, she heard the gunshot. Single report, distant, direction consistent with the western perimeter of the facility. She was out of bed and dressed in 30 seconds. Radio protocol for the competition forbade monitoring security frequencies, but she had her phone. She pulled up a map application and marked the approximate direction of the shot. By the time she reached the western fence line, security was already there. Flashlights cutting through darkness, voices calling coordinates. She stayed back in shadow, watching. They found the deer 10 minutes later. Clean kill at what security estimated was 800 meters. Poacher, the senior guard said. Happens sometimes. People think they can hunt here at night. But Sierra had moved closer while they were distracted. She found the shooter's hide, disturbed grass, boot prints, and cigarette butts. Russian brand. The same brand Sokolov had been smoking during the social hour. She didn't touch anything, just memorized the layout and backed away before security expanded their search. Back in her room, she processed what she'd learned. Someone had shot a deer, at 800 meters, at night, in a controlled facility with active security, either to send a message or to demonstrate capability, and they'd smoked Russian cigarettes while doing it. Sokolov was obvious, too obvious, which meant either he was sloppy or someone wanted her to think he was the threat. The third option was worse. Multiple threats, multiple operators, all converging on this competition for reasons that had nothing to do with trophies or prize money. She was considering this when she heard the knock. Soft, 2 taps, pause, 2 more, not random, coded. Sierra grabbed her sidearm from the nightstand and moved to the door. Who is it? Kane, Marcus Kane, we need to talk now. She opened the door, keeping the pistol behind her back. Kane stood in the hallway, alone, hands visible and empty, but his expression was serious. The friendly competitor mask was gone. You went to the fence line, he said quietly. I saw you. So did you? Yeah, I did. He glanced down the hallway, empty. Can I come in? This conversation shouldn't happen in public. Sierra evaluated options for 2 seconds and stepped aside. Kane entered. She closed the door but didn't holster the weapon. I'm RCMP Intelligence, Kane said without preamble. Royal Canadian Mounted Police. I'm tracking a Russian arms dealer who uses shooting competitions to meet clients. I think he's here, and I think you're hunting him too." Sierra said nothing, waiting. Kane continued. Kandahar, 2019, Embassy Extraction. Overwatch position took out a vehicle-borne IED before it reached our convoy. Shooter used non-standard tactics, disabled the threat without killing the driver. Very specific technique, very specific skill set. He looked at her directly. "You were there, I know it. My contact at CJOC confirmed an American asset provided Overwatch. Female. Delta affiliated. That narrows it down considerably." The words hung in the air between them. Partial confirmation of her identity. Proof he'd done research. "Even if that were true," Sierra said carefully, "it would be classified. I'm not asking you to confirm the op. I'm asking you to confirm you're here for the same reason I am. Because if we're both hunting and we don't coordinate, we're going to trip over each other. Or worse, one of us is going to mistake the other for the target." Sierra made a calculation. Trust was expensive, but operating blind in a potential hostile environment was more expensive. "I'm here on orders, JSOC, looking for someone selling classified training protocols. And I'm here tracking someone buying them, which means we might be looking for the same transaction from opposite ends." "The deal wasn't random," Sierra said. "No, it was a demonstration, showing capability to a potential buyer. 800 meters, night conditions, clean kill, that's a resume." "Russian cigarettes at the hide." Kane nodded. "Sokolov, too obvious. He's either the target or the bait." "Or the buyer." "Or the buyer." Kane moved to the window, looked out at darkness broken by perimeter lighting. "There's something else. The 2 contractors killed in Wyoming. I pulled the files. Both of them taught advanced sniper courses. Both of them had recently worked with Tier 1 units, and both of them were killed with the same signature. Long range. Single shot. Vanish." Sierra felt pieces clicking together. Someone's eliminating trainers, people who know how special operations shooters think and operate. And now a competition full of special operations shooters, with a buyer present, and someone demonstrating their capability. Kane turned back to face her. "We're not just here to observe. We're in the middle of something active." A sound outside, footsteps in the hallway, both of them went silent. The footsteps passed, faded, gone. Kane spoke quietly. "Tomorrow starts at 0600. Competition runs all day. I suggest we watch Sokolov, but we also watch everyone else. Because if this is bigger than one buyer and one seller, we need to identify all the players." "Agreed." "And Captain Wolf, when this goes active, and it will go active, I've got your back." "I don't need backup." "Yes, you do. Everyone does, even ghosts." He moved toward the door. "Oh, and for what it's worth, Canadian Joint Operations Command has a file on the Kandahar operation. They noted the American Overwatch saved multiple Canadian nationals embedded with the embassy staff. My government owes you. I owe you." He left. Sierra locked the door behind him and stood in silence processing the night's events. She'd come here expecting to identify one asset, one seller, simple reconnaissance mission. Instead, she had Russian cigarettes, dead contractors, DARPA observers, RCMP intelligence, and a Canadian operator who knew her classified history. The mission parameters had just expanded, significantly. She checked her rifle one more time before sleep, removed the damaged scope completely, set the iron sights. Her father had carried a similar rifle during Desert Storm, had taught her on these same fundamentals when she was young. General Hale had refined that teaching, turned her from a skilled shooter into an elite operator. The iron sights represented a legacy of marksmanship that predated laser rangefinders and ballistic computers. Simple steel, pure skill. Fundamentals that worked in any environment, any condition, any circumstance. The competition started in 7 hours. 47 shooters would take their positions. Most of them focused on targets and trophies and proving themselves against international peers. But at least 3 of them, Sierra now knew, were playing a different game entirely. A game where the stakes were measured in classified secrets and dead trainers and operations that couldn't be discussed in daylight. She set her phone alarm for 0500 and lay back in darkness. Sleep came slowly. When it finally arrived, she dreamed of deer falling in distant fields, of cigarettes burning in the dark, of footsteps in hallways that might belong to friends or might belong to threats. At 0300, she woke to find a note slipped under her door. 4 words written in clean block letters. Watch Day 2, IX. Roman numeral 9. Someone in this competition, one of the 47 shooters, knew she was an operator, knew she was hunting, and was either warning her or threatening her. Sierra loaded her rifle magazine with 9 rounds, 1 for each person who might be playing this game, 1 for each question that still needed answers. Tomorrow she would shoot, she would compete, she would observe. And somewhere in the middle of a civilian shooting competition in the mountains of Montana, she would find Iron Cross. Or Iron Cross would find her. Either way, the hunt had begun. Dawn broke cold over the Montana high country, painting the eastern sky in shades of copper and gold that reminded Sierra Wolf of muzzle flashes seen from a distance. She'd been awake since 0430, running through mental preparations that had nothing to do with shooting targets and everything to do with identifying threats among 46 competitors who would soon be standing behind loaded rifles. The note still sat on her nightstand. Watch Day 2, IX. She'd memorized every detail. The paper was standard competition letterhead available to all shooters. The ink was black ballpoint, common as dirt. The handwriting was block print, deliberately impersonal, impossible to trace. But the message was specific. Day 2, not today. Whoever sent this knew the competition schedule, knew something was planned for tomorrow, and knew she was more than just another shooter. Sierra loaded her rifle with deliberate precision. 9 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber, 10 total. Enough for the day's shooting and enough for contingencies that had nothing to do with paper targets. She checked her sidearm, a compact Glock 19 carried in an ankle holster that violated no competition rules because nobody thought to check for concealed weapons at a shooting competition. The irony wasn't lost on her. The staging area at 0530 was already filling with competitors going through morning rituals. Coffee, equipment checks, nervous energy manifesting as constant motion. Sierra moved through them like a ghost, observing everything, engaging with no one. Sokolov stood near the equipment tables, smoking one of his Russian cigarettes, watching the sunrise with the same cold expression he'd worn yesterday. Marcus Kane was running a boar snake through his rifle barrel, but his eyes kept scanning the crowd. Dr. Elena Cross sat in her vehicle in the parking lot, speaking on a phone, animated conversation visible through the windshield, even if the words weren't audible. Colonel Riker arrived at 0545 in a government sedan, climbed out stiffly, moved like a man whose joints remembered every hard landing and long march of a military career. He surveyed the assembled shooters with the expression of a commander inspecting troops before battle. His gaze lingered on Sierra longer than necessary. Recognition or suspicion, she couldn't tell which. At 0600 hours sharp, the range officer called the first relay of shooters to the line. The Sovereign Defense International Sniper Competition followed a progression designed to separate elite shooters from merely competent ones. Day 1 was pure marksmanship, known distances, stable positions, perfect conditions, the kind of shooting that let equipment and training shine without variables like weather or time pressure. 100 meters, 300 meters, 600 meters, 900 meters, 1200 meters, 5 shots at each distance. Points awarded based on zone struck. High value center worth maximum points, edge hits worth minimum, misses worth nothing but embarrassment. Sierra drew firing position 23, middle of the pack. She'd have the advantage of watching others shoot first, learning wind conditions and range tendencies. But she'd also have the psychological pressure of seeing scores posted before her turn. The first shooters moved to the 100-meter line. This distance was almost insultingly easy for shooters of this caliber. Targets the size of a man's torso at a distance where you could count individual features. Every competitor in the first relay shot perfect scores, 5 for 5 in the high-value zone. Applause was polite but restrained. Nobody came to Montana to be impressed by 100-meter shooting. At 300 meters, the separation began. Wind became a factor. Not strong wind, just enough breeze to drift a bullet a few inches if the shooter didn't account for it properly. Most competitors still shot clean, but a few, rushing their shots or misreading conditions, dropped points with edge zone hits. Sokolov shot in the first relay, 5 for 5 at 100 meters, 5 for 5 at 300 meters. His technique was textbook Russian military. Solid, efficient, no wasted movement. He shot like a man who'd learned on Soviet equipment and adapted to Western gear without losing the fundamentals beaten into him by instructors who didn't accept excuses or failures. Kane shot in relay 2, also perfect at 100 and 300, but Sierra noticed he was taking longer than necessary on each shot, not because he needed the time, because he was using the scope to observe, the same way she would have if she had optics, watching competitors, watching staff, looking for the same things she was looking for. Dr. Cross wasn't shooting, she was recording, a tablet in her hands, stylus moving constantly, making notes that seemed far more detailed than a simple performance study would require. Every few minutes she'd speak into a phone, brief conversations, professional tone, but her body language was wrong for a civilian researcher. Too alert, too tactical. Sierra had worked with enough intelligence personnel to recognize the type. At 600 meters, Sierra's relay was called to the line. This was where iron sights started showing their limitations against modern optics. Through a scope, a 600-meter target appeared large and clear, details visible, aiming points precise. Through iron sights, the target was smaller, less distinct, requiring the shooter to trust fundamentals rather than technology. The front sight post covered a significant portion of the target. Precise aiming became more about feel and experience than visual confirmation. Sierra settled into position. The morning air was cool against her face. Wind flags along the range showed a light breeze from the left, maybe 4 miles per hour. At 600 meters, that meant roughly 8 inches of drift for her ammunition. She held slightly right of center to compensate. The iron sights aligned. Front post centered in the rear aperture. Target visible as a dark shape beyond the sights. She controlled her breathing, felt her heart rate drop. Found the space between heartbeats where the rifle was steadiest. Pressed the trigger with smooth, steady pressure. The rifle recoiled. Through the sights she saw nothing. No impact, no immediate feedback. She had to wait for the electronic scoring system to register the hit. 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. The display updated, center mass, high-value zone, perfect hit. She repeated the process 4 more times. Each shot a separate meditation. Each trigger press a conversation between her body and the rifle and the forces of wind and gravity and distance. When she stood and safed her weapon, the display showed 5 for 5. Perfect score at 600 meters with iron sights, while shooters with $10,000 optics were dropping points on either side of her. The observation area had gone quiet. Competitors who'd been discussing equipment and technique stopped talking to watch the woman with no scope shoot better than they were shooting with every technological advantage. Riker stood behind the firing line, arms crossed, face unreadable. But Sierra caught him making a note on his clipboard, the kind of note that had nothing to do with competition scoring. At 900 meters, the difficulty increased exponentially. The target through iron sights was barely distinguishable from the backstop. Aiming became an exercise in calculated estimation based on known dimensions and environmental reading. Wind at this distance was no longer a single value. It varied along the bullet's path. A shooter had to read mirage, watch grass movement at multiple ranges, feel the air currents, and synthesize all that information into a single correction. Sierra took her time. The rules allowed 5 minutes per string. Most shooters fired all 5 shots in 2 minutes or less. Sierra used 4, watching, reading, calculating. The first shot broke clean and hit center mass. The second shot hit center mass. The third shot she pulled slightly, anticipating a wind shift that didn't materialize. The bullet impacted low left, still in the scoring zone but outside the high-value area. Not a miss, but not perfect. The crowd reacted with a mixture of relief and disappointment. She was human after all. She could make mistakes. The pressure was getting to her, or so they thought. But Sierra wasn't upset about the third shot. She was analyzing it, using it. That low left impact told her exactly how much she'd overcorrected. The fourth and fifth shots, adjusted based on that knowledge, both found the high-value center. 4 out of 5 perfect at 900 meters with iron sights. She was ranked 9th overall after the morning session. Sokolov was first. An American Navy SEAL was second. Kane was 15th, shooting well but not exceptionally, maintaining his cover as a competent but not elite competitor. Sierra's placement was exactly where she wanted to be, high enough to remain in the competition, not so high that she'd draw excessive attention, the sweet spot of operational anonymity. Lunch break was scheduled for 90 minutes. Most competitors headed to the dining facility to eat and rest before the afternoon's 1,200-meter challenge. Sierra grabbed an energy bar and a bottle of water and walked the perimeter of the facility instead. Not obviously surveillance, just a competitor stretching legs and clearing her head. But her route took her past the staff parking area, past the observation towers, past the maintenance buildings where someone with access could move unseen. She was passing Building 7, a storage facility for targets and range equipment, when she heard voices inside. Low, urgent, speaking a language that wasn't English. She moved closer to a window partially obscured by stacked equipment crates. Through the gap she could see 2 figures. One was Sokolov. The other was a man she didn't recognize. Civilian clothes. No competition credentials visible. Middle Eastern features. Late 40s. Speaking what sounded like Farsi. The conversation was brief. Sokolov handed over a small package. The other man examined it, nodded, handed over what looked like a phone. They parted without handshakes or pleasantries. Professional exchange. Transactional. Cold. Sierra memorized every detail of the unknown man. Height approximately 5'10", weight around 180, dark hair graying at temples, scar on left cheek, wedding ring, expensive watch. He moved like someone comfortable with violence but not currently expecting it. When he left Building 7, he walked toward the civilian parking area where visitors and support staff parked. Sierra followed at a distance, watched him get into a rental car with Montana plates, watched him make a phone call, watched him light a cigarette and sit there smoking while staring at his phone like he was waiting for something. She pulled out her own phone and snapped photos, distant but clear enough for facial recognition, sent them via encrypted message to a number that would route through channels back to JSOC. No text, no explanation, just images. Let the intelligence analysts earn their pay. When she returned to the staging area, Kane was waiting. He fell into step beside her without acknowledgement, just two competitors walking together. "You saw something," he said quietly. Sokolov made a handoff. Building 7. Unknown male, Middle Eastern descent civilian. Buyer or intermediary. They exchanged packages, professional, practiced. Kane nodded slowly. Cross was watching Building 7 through binoculars during lunch. She saw it too. Then we have 3 separate agencies all watching the same transaction, and none of us coordinating. Sierra's voice carried an edge of frustration. That's how operations go sideways. So what do we do? We shoot, we watch, and we wait for someone to make a mistake. She glanced at him. How's your shoulder? Kane's hand moved unconsciously to his left shoulder. Old injury from some operation he'd never discuss. Good enough. Why? Because if this goes active, and it will go active, I need to know if you can shoot and move. I can do both. Question is, can you trust me too? Sierra stopped walking, looked at him directly. Kane, if I didn't trust you, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I'd have put you on my threat list and moved on. Something in his expression shifted. Respect. Maybe gratitude. Fair enough. Then let's go shoot 1,200 meters and see if our Russian friend makes any more dead drops. The 1,200-meter line was where competitions were won or lost. At this distance, every factor mattered. Temperature affected bullet velocity. Humidity affected drag. Elevation affected air density. Even the rotation of the Earth became something serious long-range shooters had to account for. The Coriolis effect. The fact that a bullet in flight for the 3 seconds it took to travel 1,200 meters would land slightly right of aim point in the northern hemisphere due to planetary rotation. Most shooters didn't bother calculating it. But the difference between a center hit and an edge hit at this distance could be that subtle. Through a high-powered scope with ranging reticles and ballistic computers, 1,200 meters was difficult but manageable. Through iron sights, it was nearly impossible. The target appeared as little more than a smudge. The front sight post covered more of the target than it revealed. Precise aiming was impossible. This was shooting by mathematics and faith, trusting calculations, trusting fundamentals. Trusting that thousands of hours of training would manifest in muscle memory accurate enough to put bullets on target the shooter couldn't clearly see. The wind had picked up in the afternoon. Flags showed 10 to 12 miles per hour from the left, gusting, inconsistent, brutal conditions for long-range shooting. Several competitors in earlier relays missed the target entirely. Their bullets vanished into the backstop berm without ever touching paper. Zeros on the scoreboard, damage to reputations that would take years to repair. Sokolov shot a perfect string, 5 for 5 in the high-value zone. The crowd erupted in applause. The Russian acknowledged it with a brief nod and walked off the line like a man who'd expected nothing less. His equipment was top-tier Russian-made optics. His skill was undeniable, and his consistency across all distances suggested someone who shot regularly under pressure, not a weekend competitor, an active operator. Kane shot 3 out of 5 in the high-value zone. Good score, respectable. He maintained his cover as a solid but not exceptional shooter. When he walked off the line, he caught Sierra's eye and gave the slightest shake of his head. He'd seen nothing during his string. No unusual activity. No secondary contacts. Then it was Sierra's turn. She moved to the firing line carrying a rifle that looked ancient compared to the equipment the previous shooters had used. No scope, no rangefinder, no technology beyond basic iron sights that would have been familiar to a soldier in World War II. The crowd watched with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. She'd shot well at shorter distances, but 1,200 meters with iron sights, that wasn't skill. That was hope disguised as confidence. Sierra settled into position. prone, rifle supported by a simple bipod, body aligned behind the weapon. She ignored the crowd, ignored the pressure, ignored everything except the task. Her mind processed information with the cold efficiency of a ballistic computer: wind speed, wind direction, temperature, humidity, elevation, distance, all of it synthesized into a single correction. She would hold 4 feet left of center to account for wind, 2 feet high to account for bullet drop. And she would trust that the fundamentals drilled into her over a decade of training would make up for everything she couldn't see through the sights. The first shot broke clean. The rifle recoiled. She worked the bolt, ejected the spent case, loaded a fresh round, and waited. The electronic display updated: center mass, high-value zone. The crowd noise changed, shifted from polite observation to genuine interest. She'd made a perfect hit at 1,200 meters with iron sights. Once could be luck. The second shot would tell the real story. She aimed, breathed, felt the wind on her face, made a tiny adjustment for a gust she felt but couldn't see, pressed the trigger. Center mass, high-value zone. Now the crowd was standing. Competitors had stopped their preparations to watch. This wasn't normal. This wasn't standard competition shooting. This was something else, something older. A demonstration that technology was only as good as the person using it, and skill could overcome any equipment disadvantage if that skill was honed sharp enough. The third shot she deliberately pulled low. Not a miss, not even close to a miss, but definitely low left outside the high-value zone. The crowd's reaction was immediate, a collective intake of breath. She'd broken her streak. The pressure had gotten to her. But Sierra knew exactly what she'd done. That low left impact had kicked up dirt 15 feet behind the target, dirt that formed a pattern, 3 distinct puffs, not random, deliberate, Morse code. The letter S. She was sending another signal, testing to see who was watching downrange with optics, who would recognize a deliberate communication disguised as a shooting error. The fourth shot returned to center mass. High-value zone. The fifth shot followed. Perfect. When she stood and saved her rifle, the scoreboard showed 4 out of 5 perfect hits at 1,200 meters with iron sights, a score that put her in 7th place overall. Still in the hunt, still anonymous enough, still exactly where she needed to be. But as she walked off the line, she caught Colonel Riker staring at her with an expression that had moved past professional interest into something darker. Suspicion, maybe recognition. His hand moved to his pocket, touched something there, then moved away. Sierra filed the observation and kept walking. The day's shooting concluded at 1600 hours. Final standings posted on the main board showed Sokolov in first place with a nearly perfect score. The American SEAL was second. A British SAS shooter was third. Sierra was ninth. Kane was 18th. 47 shooters ranked by cumulative points across 5 distances. Tomorrow would bring tactical scenarios, unknown distances, time pressure, environmental challenges. The kind of shooting that separated field operators from range champions. The evening competitor social was mandatory. Riker's rules. He wanted shooters mingling, building camaraderie, representing their countries and units with professional courtesy. What he really wanted, Sierra suspected, was everyone in one place where they could be observed, controlled, monitored. The social was held in the main dining facility. Buffet dinner, cash bar, casual atmosphere that felt forced given the underlying tension. Sierra filled a plate with food she didn't want and positioned herself where she could watch both entrances and the majority of the room. Old habits from too many operations in denied territories where knowing your exits was the difference between completing the mission and getting buried in an unmarked grave. Dr. Cross approached with a glass of wine and a professional smile. "Captain Wolf, impressive shooting today. I'd love to discuss your technique. The cognitive processes involved in precision shooting without optical aids would make a fascinating study. I'm not interested in being studied, doctor. Please call me Alina, and I'm not asking for a formal study, just a conversation between professionals. She sipped her wine. Her eyes, however, weren't on Sierra. They were scanning the room, looking for someone. Tell me, have you noticed anything unusual about this competition? The question was too direct, too pointed. Sierra recognized an approach when she heard one. Define unusual. Participants who seem more interested in observation than competition. Equipment that doesn't match their cover stories. People who are here for reasons that have nothing to do with shooting. Cross finally looked at Sierra directly. People like you. Sierra said nothing, waiting. Cross lowered her voice. I'm not DARPA, I'm CIA. I've been tracking a black market network selling classified training protocols to foreign intelligence services. The seller is here. The buyer is here. And I think you already know that because you're hunting them too. If that were true, Sierra said carefully, why would you tell me? Because the American SEAL in second place is dead. The words hit like a physical blow. Sierra's expression didn't change, but her mind raced. The SEAL, second place, perfect scores all day. He'd been alive 3 hours ago. When? They found him 30 minutes ago in his billeting. Single gunshot wound to the head, close range, execution style. Security is calling it suicide, but anyone with eyes can see it's murder. Cross's voice remained conversational, but her intensity was unmistakable. He was my asset, deep cover. He'd infiltrated the network 6 months ago. He was supposed to identify the buyer tonight and signal for extraction. Someone killed him before he could. Sierra processed the information. A dead CIA asset, a blown operation, and a competition that was now a crime scene. Riker knows. Riker found the body. He's locked down the facility. Nobody leaves until local law enforcement processes the scene, which means whoever killed my asset is still here, still armed, still operational, and still planning to complete the transaction, Sierra finished. Because if the seller and buyer came this far, they're not walking away empty-handed. Cross nodded. Exactly. Which is why I'm approaching you. JSOC sent you here for the same reason CIA sent my asset. We're hunting the same network from different angles. And now we need to coordinate before someone else dies. Kane appeared at Sierra's elbow as if summoned. Problem. Cross glanced at him. You're RCMP, Marcus Kane, I read your file. And I didn't read yours because CIA doesn't share files with foreign intelligence services. Kane's tone was neutral, but his posture was ready. But if you're talking about dead assets and locked down facilities, I'm listening. The SEAL was selling, Cross said quietly. He was deep cover inside a network that's been acquiring American Special Operations training manuals and selling them to hostile nations. Russia, Iran, North Korea, anyone with money. He identified Sokolov as the primary broker. Tonight's meet was supposed to confirm the buyer's identity. Then we'd roll up the whole network. But someone killed him first, Kane said. Someone who knew he was CIA, which means someone with access to classified information, someone with resources, someone who's been inside this operation from the beginning. Cross looked between them. Someone in this room right now. Sierra scanned the dining facility. 45 shooters now with the SEAL dead. Staff, security, support personnel. Any one of them could be the insider, the one feeding information to the network, the one who'd identified the CIA asset and eliminated him before he could compromise the operation. Her gaze stopped on Colonel Riker. He stood near the bar speaking with local law enforcement, but his body language was wrong. Too calm, too controlled for a man whose competition had just become a homicide investigation, and his hand kept moving to his pocket, touching something, a phone maybe, or keys, or something else he was anxious about. Riker, Sierra said. Cross followed her gaze. We've considered him. Vietnam veteran, decorated, built this competition from nothing. But his son died in Afghanistan 4 years ago. Classified operation. Delta Force mission that went wrong. His son was left behind, died alone while the team extracted under fire. Motive, Kane said quietly. Revenge against Tier 1 community. It's thin, Cross admitted. Plenty of parents lose children in combat. Most don't turn traitor, but we're running out of suspects and running out of time. Sierra made a decision. We need access to the SEAL's room. He was deep cover for 6 months. He would have kept evidence, notes, communications, something to prove the network's existence if he died before extraction. Crime scene is sealed, Cross said. Then unseal it, your CIA, find a way. Cross pulled out her phone, made a call, spoke briefly, hung up. I can get us 10 minutes, but it has to be now, before FBI arrives from the field office in Billings. They moved as a unit. Sierra, Kane, and Cross, 3 operators from 3 different agencies, united by necessity and the understanding that time was a luxury they no longer possessed. The SEAL's room was in Building A. Local law enforcement had posted a single deputy at the door. Young, maybe 25. Small-town cop dealing with what was probably his first homicide. Cross showed credentials. The deputy hesitated, looked at a senior officer down the hall, got a nod, stepped aside. The room was standard billeting. Single bed, desk, bathroom. But the SEAL had turned it into a miniature operations center. His rifle case lay open on the desk, the weapon secured but the case interior modified. False bottom. Beneath it, Sierra found a USB drive, a satellite phone, and a notebook filled with handwritten observations. She pocketed the USB drive. Kane took the sat phone. Cross photographed every page of the notebook with her phone camera. They worked in silence with the efficiency of professionals who'd done this before. 3 minutes in, they heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy. Multiple people. FBI arrival ahead of schedule. They finished the documentation, replaced everything exactly as they'd found it. Sierra closed the rifle case and they exited just as 3 federal agents rounded the corner. Cross showed credentials again. Explained she was coordinating with local law enforcement. The agents, focused on securing the scene, waved them through. Back in Sierra's room, they examined their findings. The USB drive was encrypted, military grade. It would take time and resources to crack. The sat phone showed recent calls to a number with a Virginia area code. CIA headquarters. The SEAL had been checking in, reporting, following protocol right up until someone put a bullet in his head. But the notebook was the real intelligence windfall. Pages of observations about competitors, about staff, about meetings and conversations and behavioral patterns. The SEAL had been documenting everything. Kane read aloud. Sokolov, Russian SVR, not FSB, deep cover as civilian competitor. Maintains contact with unknown individuals via encrypted messaging. Made 3 dead drops in the past week. Content unknown. He was watching Sokolov the same way we are, Sierra said. But he was also watching someone else. Kane turned pages, found a section marked with a red tab. Colonel James Riker, Competition Director. Subject exhibits signs of operational tradecraft inconsistent with civilian competition management. Maintains irregular schedule. Makes encrypted calls from secure locations. Met twice with unknown individual matching description of Middle Eastern male, approximately 50 years old. Sierra's mind connected dots. The man I saw Sokolov meeting, same description. Cross was reading over Kane's shoulder. There's more. The seal documented a financial transaction, offshore account, $2 million transferred to an account in the Cayman Islands, originating account traced to a shell company in Dubai, receiving account linked to a trust in Montana. Riker's trust, Kane asked. The seal thought so, but he couldn't prove it. That's what tonight's meeting was supposed to confirm. Get the buyer on record, document the final transaction, then bring in FBI and roll up everyone involved. Cross sat back. But someone knew. Someone told the network that the seal was federal, and they eliminated him before he could complete his mission. Sierra stood, walked to the window, looked out at darkness broken by security lights. The facility was on lockdown, 45 shooters confined to their buildings, staff restricted to essential personnel, local law enforcement processing a homicide, and somewhere in this controlled chaos, a seller and a buyer were trying to complete a $2 million transaction for classified American military training protocols. Day 2, Sierra said. Kane looked up. What? The note under my door. Watch Day 2, IX. Tomorrow, something's happening tomorrow during the tactical scenarios. IX is Roman numeral 9, Cross said. 9th shooter, 9th position, 9th hour. Sierra turned from the window. Or a message, IX Iron Cross. The room went silent. They'd been calling the target Iron Cross based on code designation. But what if it wasn't a code name? What if it was a signature, a calling card? Cross pulled up files on her phone, ran searches. Her expression changed. The 2 contractors killed in Wyoming, both shot with the same ammunition, .338 Lapua Magnum, but the bullets were custom loaded, handmade, and both bullets had a mark on them, a small cross etched into the copper jacket. Iron Cross, Kane said. It's not a code name, it's a literal signature. The killer marks his ammunition. Sierra felt pieces falling into place. The seal wasn't killed by Sokolov. He was killed by the buyer, someone who shoots custom-marked ammunition, someone who's been eliminating witnesses and trainers, someone who's here at this competition. And tomorrow, Cross added, during the tactical scenarios with unknown distances and time pressure and environmental stress, they're planning to complete the transaction, exchange money for classified protocols, and probably eliminate anyone who might identify them. Kane checked his watch. It's 2100. Day 2 scenarios start at 0600. That gives us 9 hours to identify the buyer, stop the transaction, and do it without getting killed or starting a firefight in the middle of a civilian shooting competition. We need to search Riker's office, Sierra said. If he's the buyer or if he's facilitating the transaction, there will be evidence, communications, financial records, something. Cross shook her head. His office is in the admin building. Security cameras, electronic locks. We'd need a warrant or a damn good cover story. So we create a cover story. Sierra was already forming the plan. Kane, you create a distraction, something that pulls security away from the admin building. Cross, you disable the cameras. I'll get into Riker's office. And if we find evidence, Kane asked, what then? We can't exactly arrest him in the middle of a competition. We document everything, we secure the evidence, and then we call in FBI with enough proof that they have no choice but to act immediately. Sierra checked her own sidearm. Full magazine, one in the chamber. But we do it quietly. No heroics. No shootouts. We're intelligence gathering, not direct action. The plan was simple. Maybe too simple. But complex plans fell apart under pressure, and they were already operating under more pressure than any of them wanted to acknowledge. At 2200 hours they moved. Kane triggered the fire alarm in Building C old building. Sensitive smoke detectors. A cigarette held too close to a sensor was all it took. The alarm brought security running. Protocols required full building evacuation and sweep before the all-clear could be given. That would take 20 minutes minimum. Cross accessed the camera system through a laptop and a security backdoor that suggested CIA had prepared for contingencies. The feeds from the admin building went to loop. 30 minutes of recorded empty hallways playing on repeat. Anyone watching would see nothing unusual. Sierra moved through shadows toward the admin building. The facility was on lockdown, but that didn't mean patrols. It meant checkpoints, fixed positions, predictable patterns. She'd been observing security since arrival. She knew the gaps. She exploited them. The admin building's rear entrance used a keycard lock, but the SEAL's notebook had included security codes, backup information in case he needed emergency access. Sierra punched in the code. The lock clicked open. She was inside. Riker's office was on the second floor, corner office, window overlooking the main range. She took the stairs rather than the elevator, quieter, less chance of being trapped. The hallway was dark except for emergency lighting. Her boots made no sound on industrial carpet. The office door was locked but not alarmed. Standard key lock. Sierra had learned lock picking from an agency instructor who'd spent 20 years breaking into places people didn't want broken into. 30 seconds with a tension wrench and a pick. The lock surrendered. Inside, she used a red lens flashlight. Enough light to see, not enough to be visible from outside. The office was neat, organized, framed photos on the wall. Riker in dress uniform receiving medals. Riker with various military and political figures. And one photo, smaller than the others, of a young man in army fatigues. Similar features to Riker. His son, the one who died in Afghanistan. Sierra moved to the desk, searched drawers, found personnel files, competition records, financial documents for the event, everything normal, everything expected. But there was a safe under the desk, floor-mounted, combination lock. She pulled out her phone, texted Kane, need combination, floor safe. The response came 30 seconds later, try service number reverse. Sierra tried Riker's service number backwards. The safe didn't open. She tried his son's birth date. No success. She tried the date of his son's death. The safe opened. Inside was a laptop, a burned phone, and a small wooden box. Sierra photographed everything with her phone before touching anything. Then she opened the laptop. Password protected. But the SEAL's notebook had included one more piece of information, a password Riker used for encrypted communications. Sierra typed it in. The laptop unlocked. What she found in the next 5 minutes changed everything. Emails to offshore accounts, communications with Sokolov, meeting schedules with the Middle Eastern intermediary, financial records showing $2 million moving through shell companies, and a file labeled protocols containing scanned copies of classified Tier 1 sniper training manuals, Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, Army Special Forces. Everything a hostile nation would need to understand and counter American Special Operations tactics. But there was something else, a message thread with someone identified only as IX, recent messages, tonight. IX asset eliminated, transaction proceeds as planned, day 2, scenario 3, confirm. RYKER, confirmed, payment on delivery, no witnesses. IX understood, Iron Cross sends regards. Sierra photographed everything, the emails, the files, the message thread, evidence that would put Riker away for life and dismantle a network that had compromised American operations. She was closing the laptop when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy boots, multiple people. Security had finished with Building C faster than expected, or someone had noticed the camera loop. Either way, she was about to have company she couldn't explain away. She secured the evidence, closed the safe, locked it, moved to the window. Second floor, 20-foot drop to landscaping below. Not ideal, but better than being caught in Riker's office with no explanation. The footsteps stopped outside the door, a voice she recognized, Riker. Someone's been in my office. The door lock shows forced entry. Another voice, security, sir, we need to sweep the building. Sierra didn't wait to hear more. She opened the window, slipped through, hung from the sill for a moment, let go. She hit the ground and rolled. Landscaping bark cushioned the impact, but pain shot through her ankle. Sprained, not broken. She could move. She limped into shadows as lights came on in Riker's office above. Her phone buzzed, text from Cross, abort, security active, EXFIL now. Sierra moved through darkness toward the rendezvous point behind Building B. Her ankle screamed protest with every step, but she maintained pace. Behind her, more lights came on. Voices calling. Security was sweeping the grounds. She reached the rendezvous. Kane was there. Cross arrived 30 seconds later. You get it? Cross asked. Sierra held up her phone. Everything. Emails, files, message thread with IX. Riker's dirty. He's been facilitating the network. And tomorrow during Scenario 3, they're completing the transaction. Then we call FBI now, Kane said. With that evidence, they'll have to move immediately. But Cross was shaking her head. If we call FBI now, the network goes to ground. Sokolov vanishes. IX vanishes. We'll get Riker, but we'll lose everyone else. We need to catch them in the act. Document the handoff. Get everyone in one place. Which means we participate in tomorrow's scenarios, Sierra said. We let the transaction proceed, and we document everything. Kane looked at both of them. You're talking about letting a $2 million sale of classified material happen so we can make arrests afterwards. That's insane. That's the job, Cross said. We're intelligence officers. We gather intelligence. We build cases. We don't just stop one transaction. We dismantle entire networks. Sierra's ankle was swelling inside her boot. Her head was pounding from adrenaline crash. And tomorrow, she was going to participate in tactical shooting scenarios while simultaneously running a surveillance operation against an unknown assassin who marked bullets with iron crosses and had already killed multiple people. All right, she said. We do it your way, but if shooting starts, we end it. No more dead assets. No more murdered trainers. We see IX, we put them down. Cross hesitated, then nodded, agreed. They separated, returned to their respective buildings through different routes. Sierra made it to her room without being seen, stripped off her gear, examined her ankle, definitely sprained. She wrapped it tight with an ace bandage from her medical kit, took ibuprofen, elevated the leg. At midnight, her phone buzzed. Message from an unknown number. No caller ID. No routing information, just 4 words. Tomorrow you die, ghost. Sierra stared at the message. Someone knew her call sign. Ghost. The name she'd earned in Kandahar. The name that was supposed to be classified. The name that meant someone had accessed files they shouldn't have accessed. She didn't respond to the message. Didn't acknowledge it. Just screenshotted it and sent it to the same JSOC number she'd used earlier. Then she loaded her rifle, checked her sidearm, laid out her gear for tomorrow, and tried to sleep knowing that somewhere in this facility, an assassin who called themselves Iron Cross was preparing to kill her. Day 2 would be chaos, tactical scenarios, unknown distances, environmental challenges, And somewhere in the middle of it all, a transaction worth $2 million and the lives of future American operators. Sierra closed her eyes, controlled her breathing, slowed her heart rate, found the calm center that had kept her alive through a decade of operations in places where hesitation meant death. Tomorrow she would compete, tomorrow she would hunt, and tomorrow, one way or another, she would find Iron Cross. The game had started the moment she arrived in Montana, but tomorrow it would end. Sleep never came. Sierra Wolf lay in darkness watching shadows move across the ceiling, her mind running tactical scenarios for a day that would demand she compete in a shooting competition while simultaneously stopping a multi-million-dollar espionage transaction and avoiding assassination by an unknown enemy who knew her classified call sign. Her ankle throbbed despite the wrapping and medication. Pain was information. It told her she was injured but functional. She could shoot. She could move. She could fight if circumstances required it. At 0400 she gave up on sleep, rose, dressed in competition gear that concealed her sidearm and backup ammunition, loaded her rifle with the same deliberate precision she'd used every morning of her military career. Today's scenarios would involve unknown distances, moving targets, environmental challenges, and time pressure. The kind of shooting that separated field operators from range shooters. But somewhere in the chaos of tactical scenarios, a conspiracy would attempt to complete its final transaction. $2 million for classified protocols that would get American operators killed, and Sierra was going to stop it. She checked her phone, messages from Kane and Cross confirming they were ready. A message from the unknown JSOC number acknowledging receipt of yesterday's intelligence, but providing no operational guidance. She was on her own. 3 federal operators from 3 agencies, working outside official channels, about to interdict a conspiracy in the middle of a civilian event. The kind of operation that either ended with commendations or congressional hearings depending on how it went. The staging area at 0530 was subdued. News of the SEAL's death had spread through the competitor population. Official story was suicide. Unofficial whispers suggested something darker. 45 shooters remained, down from the original 47. 1 dead, 1 withdrawn. Everyone else trying to focus on competition while looking over their shoulders and wondering if they were safe. Colonel Riker stood at the front of the assembly area. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Stress lines deep in his face, eyes carrying weight that went beyond competition management. He knew Sierra had been in his office, knew his operation was compromised, but he couldn't act without exposing himself. So he stood there playing the role of grieving competition director while planning his next move. Day 2 scenarios begin in 30 minutes, Riker announced to the assembled shooters. We've had a tragedy, we've had loss, but this competition honors warriors who don't quit when things get hard. We finish what we start, we shoot, we compete. We prove that the warrior spirit survives anything. His gaze found Sierra in the crowd, held for a moment, then moved on. Scenario 1 is urban engagement. Unknown distances, 200 to 800 meters. Moving targets. Time limit 5 minutes. You'll shoot in assigned relays. Check your assignments on the board. Sierra was assigned to Relay 3. Kane was in Relay 2. Sokolov was in Relay 1. The Russian would shoot first. She'd watch him, learn his patterns, see if he made contact with anyone during the chaos of the scenario. Dr. Alina Cross stood near the equipment tables wearing civilian observer credentials, but her body language was pure operator. Hand near her concealed weapon, eyes scanning constantly. She caught Sierra's gaze and gave the slightest nod. Ready. Relay 1 moved to the urban scenario range, a constructed environment designed to simulate city combat. Buildings, vehicles, obstacles, targets that appeared and disappeared in windows and doorways. Shooters had to identify threats, estimate ranges, engage while moving, all while a clock counted down their allotted time. Sokolov moved through the scenario like liquid violence. Smooth, efficient, no wasted motion. He engaged targets with the precision of someone who'd done this for real in places where mistakes meant death. 13 targets in 4 minutes and 40 seconds, all hits, all center mass. When he emerged from the scenario, his expression was unchanged, cold, professional. He walked directly to a water station, filled a bottle, and made a phone call. Brief conversation. Then he lit one of his Russian cigarettes and waited. Sierra watched him through binoculars borrowed from a competitor who was happy to lend equipment to the iron sight shooter everyone was talking about. Sokolov's conversation appeared normal, but his free hand made gestures that weren't casual, controlled, deliberate, signals to someone watching. She scanned the area, found a man in civilian clothes near the staff parking area. Middle Eastern features, same description as the intermediary from yesterday. He was watching Sokolov through his own binoculars. The exchange was happening, right now, in plain sight during the competition, but Sierra couldn't act yet, couldn't prove conspiracy with observations alone. She needed to catch the actual handoff, see money or protocols change hands, get evidence that would hold up in federal court. Kane's relay moved to the line. He shot well but not exceptionally, maintained his cover. But Sierra noticed he was positioning himself to observe the same areas she was watching. The staff parking, the equipment buildings, the places where someone could make a covert exchange during the controlled chaos of competition. Then it was Sierra's turn. Relay 3. She moved to the start line with 4 other shooters. The range officer explained the scenario. Targets would appear, some marked as threats, some as civilians. Shoot threats, avoid civilians, unknown distances, time pressure, thinking while shooting. The kind of tactical problem that required split-second decisions under stress. The buzzer sounded. Sierra entered the scenario. The first target appeared in a second-story window, threat silhouette. She estimated range at 400 meters, adjusted for elevation and wind. Fired. Target dropped. Electronic sensor confirmed the hit. She moved to cover behind a concrete barrier. Second target, ground level, doorway, civilian holding a phone. She held fire. Target disappeared. Correct decision. Points preserved. Third target, rooftop. 600 meters, threat with rifle. She adjusted her iron sights. Aimed, fired, hit. She moved through the scenario with the muscle memory of someone who'd done similar exercises in real combat zones where the targets shot back and the consequences of mistakes were measured in body bags. 9 targets engaged. 8 hits. 1 deliberate pass on a civilian. Total time 4 minutes and 12 seconds. When she exited the scenario, her ankle was screaming. The running and positioning had stressed the sprain, but she'd performed, maintained her position in the competition, and more importantly, she'd had eyes on the facility during her run, had seen Sokolov move toward Building 7, the same building where yesterday's handoff occurred. He was there for 30 seconds, then emerged and returned to the observation area. Something had been deposited or retrieved. Sierra needed to know which. The morning scenarios continued. Urban engagement gave way to vehicle-mounted shooting. Targets at unknown distances while riding in the bed of a moving pickup truck. Brutal test of fundamentals and adaptability. Sierra shot from moving platforms during her run, her body compensating for vehicle motion through training that had been beaten into her over years of real-world operations. 12 targets, 11 hits, good enough to keep her in the top 10 overall. But she wasn't thinking about standings. She was watching Sokolov, watching the intermediary, watching Riker, who moved between scenarios with a phone constantly at his ear, coordinating something, planning something. At 1100 hours, the range officer announced a 30-minute break before Scenario 3, the final tactical challenge. long-range engagement from improvised positions in mountainous terrain, targets from 600 to 1,500 meters, natural cover, no time limit but limited ammunition, 5 rounds total, make every shot count. This was it, the scenario where the transaction would happen. Sierra was certain. Riker's messages had specified Scenario 3, and the setup was perfect for covert exchange. Shooters spread across rough terrain, limited sight lines, staff moving between positions, chaos and distance providing cover. She found Kane and Cross behind Building B away from cameras and crowds. They spoke in low, urgent tones. Sokolov deposited something in Building 7, Kane confirmed. I checked while you were running vehicle scenario, found a false panel in the floor, empty now but recently used. Dust pattern shows something was there as of yesterday. The protocols, Cross said. He's staging them for pickup during Scenario 3. Buyer retrieves them while everyone's focused on the shooting. But who's the buyer? Sierra asked. Riker's facilitating, but the messages referenced IX, Iron Cross. Someone else is involved. Cross pulled up files on her phone. I've been running pattern analysis on the competitors, looking for anyone with connections to hostile intelligence services or black market networks. Most of them check out clean, military service, law enforcement backgrounds, but there's one anomaly. She showed them a photo. Competitor number 9, female, late 30s, British credentials, listed as civilian competitive shooter, but Cross's file showed something different. Sarah Vance, that's her competition name. Real name is Sarah Al-Aziz, half British, half Syrian. Former MI6 until she was burned for selling classified intelligence to Russian SVR. Disappeared 4 years ago. Resurfaced on the international shooting circuit under an assumed identity. And she's been at every major competition where classified security information was later compromised. Sierra studied the photo, remembered seeing the woman during registration. Quiet, unremarkable, exactly the kind of cover that worked because it drew no attention. Competitor number 9, IX in Roman numerals. Iron Cross, Kane said. She's the buyer. She's been using competitions to meet sellers, verify their capability, complete transactions, perfect cover. International events with minimal security screening. Shooters from dozens of countries, easy to blend in. And she's armed, Cross added. Licensed to carry competition rifle and sidearm. No one questions a competitor with weapons at a shooting competition. Sierra felt the tactical picture clarifying. Scenario 3. Shooters spread across terrain. Vance retrieves protocols from Building 7 during her shooting window. Meets Sokolov somewhere in the hills. Completes payment. They both extract separately during the post-scenario confusion. And if anyone interferes, Kane said, Vance has already proven she'll kill. The SEAL, the contractors in Wyoming, all long-range shots, all her signature. So we stop her during the scenario, Cross said. Catch her with the protocols, arrest her and Sokolov together. Riker goes down as facilitator. Network dismantled. But Sierra was shaking her head. If we move too soon, she'll abort. Protocols stay hidden. Vance disappears. Sokolov claims diplomatic immunity as Russian representative. We get nothing. We need to catch her with the protocols and the payment. Need both for a case that sticks. Then we let the transaction complete, Kane said, and we take her down during extraction. That's a lot of things that can go wrong, Cross pointed out. Vance is a trained killer, former intelligence officer. She won't go quietly. Sierra checked her rifle, made sure her sidearm was accessible. Then we make sure we're ready for not quiet, but we do this clean. No civilian casualties, no competitors caught in crossfire. This is a federal arrest, not a combat operation. They separated to prepare for Scenario 3. Sierra returned to her staging area and found a message on her phone from the unknown number that had threatened her last night. Scenario 3. Watch the HILLS. Come alone or others die. It was a trap. Vance knew Sierra was hunting her, knew she'd be watching Scenario 3, and she was using that knowledge to set an ambush. The question was whether Sierra walked into it knowing it was a trap, or whether she played it safe and risked losing Vance entirely. She texted Kane and Cross. Threat assessment. VANCEKNOWS. We're coming. Kane's response was immediate. Change of TACTICS. Sierra considered. Vance expected her to come alone or not at all, expected fear or hesitation. She was about to get neither. No changes. We proceed, but stay sharp. Scenario 3 began at 1200 hours. The range extended into actual mountainous terrain behind the facility. Natural cover, elevation changes, real-world conditions that tested everything a long-range shooter needed to master. 5 rounds. 5 targets at unknown distances between 600 and 1500 meters. Shooters would move through the terrain, locate targets, estimate ranges, engage from improvised positions. Relay assignments put Vance in Relay 1, Sokolov in Relay 2, Sierra in Relay 4. They'd be separated by time and distance, perfect for a covert exchange. Vance moved into the terrain first. She carried a precision rifle with high-end optics, moved like someone comfortable in rough country, found her first target at 700 meters, engaged from behind a rock formation. Clean hit, moved to the next position. Sierra watched through binoculars from the observation point, watched Vance's route. She was deviating from the optimal shooting path, making a loop that took her past Building 7. Not obvious unless you were looking for it, but definitely deliberate. Vance disappeared behind a ridgeline, out of sight for 3 minutes. When she reappeared, she was carrying a small pack that hadn't been visible before. The protocols. She'd retrieved them during her movement. Now she just needed to complete the exchange with Sokolov. But Sokolov was still waiting for his relay, and Riker was watching from the control point with binoculars and a radio, coordinating, making sure the transaction completed without interference. Sierra made a decision. She wasn't waiting for Relay 4. She was going active now. She moved away from the observation point, into terrain parallel to the scenario route, moving fast despite her ankle. She knew where Vance was heading, knew where the exchange would happen. There was a natural depression about 800 meters into the course. Good cover, out of sight from the observation points, perfect for a handoff. She reached the depression and found a position with good concealment and clear sightlines. Settled in, waited. 15 minutes later, Vance appeared, moving carefully, checking her backtrail, professional countersurveillance. She reached the depression and stopped, set down her pack, pulled out a sat phone and made a call. Sierra couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see Vance's body language. Tense, alert, waiting for something or someone. Movement from the opposite direction. Sokolov. He'd left the staging area, moved into terrain during the relay transition when everyone's attention was on other shooters. He approached Vance with the casual confidence of someone who'd done this before. They didn't embrace or acknowledge each other personally, just professionals completing a transaction. Vance handed over the pack with the protocols. Sokolov examined the contents briefly, nodded, then handed her a phone, not payment, just a phone with account information, electronic transfer, untraceable, clean. Sierra had seen enough. She keyed her radio. Quiet click pattern that Kane and Cross would recognize, the signal to move. But before they could close in, Vance's head snapped up. She'd heard something or sensed something, training kicking in. She grabbed her rifle. "We have a problem," she said to Sokolov. Not in English, in Russian. Sierra's language training caught it. "We're being watched." Sokolov's hand moved to his sidearm. "Where?" "I don't know, but someone's here. Change of plans, we split up. I'll handle pursuit. You get the protocols to the vehicle." They separated. Sokolov moving fast downslope toward the staff parking area, Vance moving upslope, toward Sierra's position. Either she'd spotted Sierra's hide or she was doing a security sweep. Either way, they were about to make contact. Sierra had two choices: break cover and pursue Sokolov, letting Vance escape, or hold position and engage Vance, letting Sokolov get away with the protocols. Neither option was good. Both meant partial failure. She chose option 3. She triggered the emergency signal on her phone, the one that broadcast to both Kane and Cross simultaneously. Then she stood up from her hide and moved directly toward Vance. No subtlety, no stealth, just direct confrontation. Vance saw her immediately. Rifle came up, but she didn't fire. Too many witnesses in the distance, too much noise. She ran instead. Sierra pursued. Her ankle protested every step, but adrenaline overrode pain. She'd spent a decade chasing enemies through worse terrain in worse conditions. Vance was fast, but Sierra was motivated by something stronger than money or ideology. She was motivated by the knowledge that the woman she was chasing had killed American operators and would kill more if she escaped. They ran through pine forest and over rocky ground. Vance had a head start, but Sierra had field craft. She read the terrain, anticipated Vance's route, cut angles, closed distance. Ahead, Vance stopped running, turned, brought up her rifle. Sierra dove behind a boulder as the shot cracked past her head. Professional shooting. Center mass aim. If she'd been a step slower, she'd be dead. Return fire wasn't an option. Too much distance, too much cover. Sierra moved laterally, using terrain, getting closer. Her sidearm was effective to 50 meters. She needed to close that gap. Another shot. This one hit the tree beside her. Bark exploded, splinters cut her face. Vance was adjusting, learning Sierra's movement pattern. Sierra changed tactics, stopped moving laterally, moved directly toward Vance. Aggressive, unexpected, closing distance fast. Vance fired twice more. Both shots close but missing because Sierra was moving unpredictably. 50 meters, 40 meters, 30 meters. At 25 meters, Sierra drew her sidearm and fired. 3 rounds, controlled pairs and a follow-up. Vance went down, not dead, hit in the shoulder and leg, screaming. Weapon fallen from her grasp. Sierra approached carefully, kicked the rifle away, checked Vance for additional weapons, found a backup pistol, removed it. Then she zip-tied Vance's hands using restraints from her belt kit. "You're under arrest," Sierra said. "Federal charges, espionage, murder, treason." Vance spat blood. "You have no jurisdiction here. This is civilian land. I have diplomatic credentials." "Your credentials are fake, your name is fake, and the protocols you just bought are evidence that's going to put you away for life." Sierra keyed her radio. "Cross, Kane, I have Vance in custody, but Sokolov is mobile with the protocols, heading for staff parking." Kane's voice crackled back. "On it. We've got eyes on him. He's at his vehicle." "Don't let him leave," Sierra ordered. "Those protocols can't leave this facility." She secured Vance to a tree using additional zip ties. The woman wasn't going anywhere with a shoulder wound and leg injury. Then Sierra moved downslope as fast as her damaged ankle would allow. Back toward the facility. Toward the parking area where Sokolov was attempting to escape with classified materials that had cost American lives to protect. She emerged from the tree line to see Sokolov's vehicle racing toward the front gate. Kane was running from the admin building. Cross was already at her vehicle, engine running. Sierra waved them on and moved toward the gate herself. If Sokolov made it to public roads, they'd lose him in the rural Montana landscape. Too many dirt roads, too many places to disappear. But the gate wasn't opening. Riker stood at the control point, had overridden the automatic system, was manually controlling access, and he wasn't opening it for Sokolov. He was trapping him. Sokolov saw it, slammed his brakes, vehicle skidded. He jumped out, grabbed a rifle from the back seat, took cover behind his vehicle. This was about to become a firefight in the middle of a civilian competition facility. Exactly what Sierra had wanted to avoid. "Stand down," she shouted. "You're surrounded, federal agents. There's no escape." Sokolov's response was to fire 2 rounds in her direction, professional suppression, keeping heads down while he assessed options. But he was trapped. Gate closed ahead. Sierra, Kane, and Cross behind. And now security was responding. Armed guards moving in from the perimeter. Riker was still at the control point, still watching. And Sierra realized he wasn't trying to trap Sokolov. He was trying to kill him. Eliminate the Russian before he could testify, tie up loose ends. She moved toward Riker, fast, direct. He saw her coming, reached for a pistol on his belt. But Sierra was faster. Years of close-quarters combat training manifesting in movements too quick for a 60-year-old man to counter. She had his weapon hand controlled, had him turned and pressed against the control panel, had his pistol removed and thrown clear. "It's over, Colonel," she said. "Sokolov's in custody, Vance is in custody, and we have all the evidence from your office. The emails, the files, the messages, everything." Riker sagged. The fight went out of him. "My son," he said quietly. "They left him behind, Delta Force, your people. They extracted under fire and they left my boy to die alone." "I read the after-action report," Sierra said. "Your son stayed behind to provide cover. He volunteered. He saved his team. He died a hero. He died alone, calling for help that never came. He died serving his country, the same country you just betrayed." Sierra's voice was hard. No sympathy, no understanding, just cold fact. "You sold out American operators because you couldn't handle your grief. How many soldiers will die because of the protocols you gave to our enemies? How many families will lose sons and daughters because you needed revenge?" Riker had no answer. Cross arrived with handcuffs. Read him his rights. Led him away toward a security building where local law enforcement was already arriving in response to the shooting reports. Kane had Sokolov at gunpoint. The Russian had surrendered when he realized the situation was unwinnable. He sat on the ground, hands behind his head, while Kane secured him. Security found Vance in the woods where Sierra had left her. EMTs were treating her wounds, while federal agents read her rights and began processing her for transport to a federal facility. By 1300 hours, it was finished. 3 arrests, classified protocols recovered, network dismantled, and a competition full of confused shooters trying to understand why their event had turned into a federal operation. Sierra sat on the tailgate of a security vehicle, medics examining her ankle. The adrenaline was fading. Pain was returning, but the mission was complete. She'd identified the targets, stopped the transaction, prevented classified materials from reaching hostile nations. General Hale called her phone at 1400 hours. "Captain Wolf, I've been briefed on the situation. Well done." "Thank you, sir, but it was a team effort. Our CMP and CIA coordinated effectively. I'll make sure the appropriate commendations are filed, but right now I need to know your status. Are you mission capable?" Sierra looked at her swollen ankle, at the cuts on her face from tree bark, at her hands still shaking slightly from adrenaline crash. I need 72 hours recovery, then I'm mission capable. Good, because we have activity in Syria that requires your particular skill set. But that's a conversation for after you've rested. For now, get medical treatment and get some sleep. Sir, what about the competition? I'm still technically registered. There was a pause. Then Hale's voice carried something that might have been amusement. Captain, you just stopped an espionage conspiracy and took down 3 foreign assets. I think you've earned the right to withdraw from a shooting competition. With respect, sir, I'd like to finish what I started. Another pause, longer this time. You're serious? Yes, sir. The scenarios are suspended pending investigation, but the final event is long-range precision, 1,500 meters. 5 competitors advance based on cumulative scores. I'm currently ranked 7th. If I shoot well, I advance to finals. And you want to compete, why exactly? Sierra looked toward the range, toward the distant target markers, toward the mountains beyond. Because I came here under orders to use iron sights, and I haven't proven yet that they work at the extreme ranges. The mission was interrupting conspiracy, but the cover was competition. I'd like to maintain cover until the end. Hale sighed, the sound of a commander who'd learned long ago not to argue with operators who'd made up their minds. You have 24 hours, then you're on a transport back to base. Understood? Understood, sir. The competition resumed the following morning. Reduced field. 42 competitors remained, 3 arrested, 2 withdrawn, everyone else trying to process what had happened and focus on shooting. The final event was pure long-range precision. 1,500 meters, 3 shots. Top 5 overall scores would compete in a shoot-off for the championship. Sierra's ankle was heavily wrapped. Medics had cleared her to shoot but not to run tactical scenarios. Fine with her. The final event was static shooting, prone position, all the time needed. Just a shooter, a rifle, iron sights, and a target 3/4 of a mile away. She drew shooting position 42, dead last. She'd watch everyone else shoot first, learn conditions, see the competition, then make her attempt. Kane approached before she took the line. How's the ankle? Painful but functional. How's the shoulder? He rotated it experimentally. Same. We're a matched set of wounded warriors. You shooting? Yeah, probably won't place, but I didn't come all this way to quit early. He looked toward the distant target. That's a hell of a shot with iron sights. It is, but I've made harder shots in worse conditions. Kane hesitated, then spoke quietly. I need to tell you something about the Kandahar story, about my contact at CJOC confirming an American asset. Sierra waited. There was no contact at CJOC. There was no confirmation. I made it up. He met her eyes. I was testing you, seeing if you'd correct me or play along. A real undercover operator wouldn't break cover for a small detail. You didn't. That told me everything I needed to know about who you were. Sierra felt a flicker of something, not quite anger, more like professional respect for a well-executed deception. You're good. So are you, and I want you to know something else. The embassy extraction in Kandahar, the Overwatch position that took out the VBIED, that really happened, and Canadian nationals really were saved. My government really does owe whoever made that shot. He paused. I don't know if it was you. You'll never confirm it, but if it was, thank you, on behalf of everyone who made it home that day. Sierra nodded, acknowledgement without words. Some debts couldn't be repaid with language. The shooting began. 41 competitors attempting the same impossible shot. Target barely visible even through scopes. Wind gusting and variable. Temperature climbing as morning gave way to afternoon. every environmental factor working against precision. Most shooters hit the target, somewhere, edge zones, low-scoring impacts. A few missed entirely. Only 8 shooters managed center mass hits. Only 2 found the high-value zone in the center. Then it was Sierra's turn. She moved to the line carrying her rifle, the weapon her father had maintained with obsessive care. The iron sights he'd taught her to trust when she was young. Equipment that represented a legacy of marksmanship that stretched back through generations of American soldiers who'd learned to shoot before computers could calculate bullet trajectories. The range officer asked if she was ready. She nodded. "You may fire when ready." Sierra settled into position, the same position she'd used for thousands of shots over a decade of service. Prone, stable, rifle supported by bipod, body aligned, she controlled her breathing, felt her heart rate drop, found the comm center where noise and pressure and doubt couldn't reach. The iron sights aligned on the distant target, 1,500 meters away, a speck against pale Montana dirt. The front sight post covered more of the target than it revealed. She couldn't see scoring zones, couldn't verify center mass. This was pure calculated faith, trust in mathematics, trust in environmental reading, trust in fundamentals drilled into her over 10,000 hours of practice. She adjusted for wind, 12 miles per hour from the left with gusts to 15. At 1,500 meters, that meant nearly 6 feet of drift. She held right to compensate, adjusted for bullet drop, adjusted for temperature and elevation and the Coriolis effect of planetary rotation. All of it synthesized into a single aim point that existed in her mind rather than her vision. The first shot broke clean, smooth trigger press, no anticipation, no flinch, perfect execution of fundamentals. The rifle recoiled. The bullet flew. 4 seconds of flight time. She waited. The electronic display updated. Center mass. High-value zone. The crowd erupted in applause. She ignored it, loaded another round, adjusted based on what the first shot had told her about current conditions. Aimed, fired. High-value center, again. The applause was louder now, people standing, recognizing they were watching something special, something rare, a demonstration that technology was just a tool and skill was the weapon. Third shot, final shot. She didn't need it to advance to the shoot-off. She'd already secured her position, but she aimed anyway, fired anyway, because this wasn't about qualifying. This was about proving that iron sights worked, that fundamentals mattered, that a skilled shooter with basic equipment could match anyone with the most advanced technology. High-value center. Third perfect hit at 1,500 meters with iron sights. When she stood and safed her rifle, the crowd was on its feet. Competitors who dismissed her 3 days ago as delusional or desperate were applauding a performance that redefined what they thought possible. She'd shot better with iron sights than most of them had shot with $10,000 optics. The final 5 were announced. Sierra was third overall, behind a German military sniper and an American civilian champion, ahead of a British SAS shooter and Kane, who'd made the cut by a narrow margin. The shoot-off was scheduled for 1,600 hours, 1 shot each, closest to center wins. Simple, brutal, fair. The 5 shooters moved to the line together, drew lots for shooting order. Sierra drew position 4, next to last. Kane drew 5, he'd shoot after her. The German shot first, good hit. Center mass but not quite high value. The American shot second, perfect center, high value zone. The British shooter went third, edge of high value, good but not winning. Sierra's turn. She settled into position for the last time in this competition. Her ankle was numb now. Medics had given her something for the pain. Her hands were steady, her breathing controlled, her mind clear. She thought about her father, about the rifle he'd carried during Desert Storm, about General Hale, who'd trained her to trust fundamentals over technology, about Sergeant Reeves, still recovering from the injury he'd taken covering her during the operation where her scope was destroyed, about all the operators who'd used iron sights when technology failed, who'd made impossible shots in desperate situations, who'd proven that skill mattered more than equipment. The iron sights aligned, front post centered in rear aperture, target barely visible beyond the sights, 1,500 meters of air and wind and gravity between the muzzle and the target. She whispered something, words only she could hear, for everyone who said it couldn't be done. She fired. The bullet flew, 4 seconds of flight, the longest 4 seconds of her life. Then the display updated. Dead center, perfect impact, geometric center of the high-value zone, as close to perfect as the electronic system could measure. The crowd went silent, not because they weren't impressed, because they were too impressed for noise. What they just witnessed was the kind of shooting that happened once in a career, maybe once in a generation. Iron sights at 1,500 meters producing a shot that precision shooters with the best equipment in the world couldn't match. Kane shot last. Good hit, high value but not center, not quite what Sierra had just produced. The announcer called the results. Captain Sierra Wolf, first place. Sovereign Defense International Sniper Competition. First woman to win. First iron sight shooter to win in the event's 9-year history. First active duty Tier 1 operator to compete and win. Colonel Vance, the deputy who'd taken over from Riker, presented the trophy. Captain, this is one of the most impressive displays of marksmanship I've ever witnessed. What you did today will be talked about for decades. Sierra accepted the trophy, heavy crystal and brass, engraved with the competition seal. Thank you, ma'am, but I didn't do this alone. This represents everyone who taught me, everyone who believed fundamentals matter, everyone who proved that skill beats technology when the skill is sharp enough. The ceremony concluded. Competitors congratulated her. Kane shook her hand. Hell of a shot, Captain. Your father would be proud. Sierra smiled slightly. He would be. He taught me these fundamentals, told me technology could fail but skill never would. Looks like he was right. He was, and so was whoever trained you after him. You're the best iron sight shooter I've ever seen. He paused. What's next for you? Transport leaves in 18 hours. New mission, new country, new problems. She looked toward the mountains. What about you? Similar story, different hemisphere, different enemies. He offered his hand. Until next time, Captain. Until next time. Sierra returned to her billeting and packed her gear. The trophy went in her rifle case, wrapped carefully. The iron sights she cleaned and stored with the same reverence some people reserved for religious artifacts. They'd proven themselves again, proven that the old ways still worked, that fundamentals still mattered. At 2200 hours, she received a text from General Hale. Proud of you. The iron sights worked because you trusted them. Most shooters never learn that lesson. See you in Syria. She responded with a single word, Roger. Then she lay in darkness for the last time in Montana, listening to wind move through pine trees and thinking about the past 3 days. She'd come here expecting a simple intelligence-gathering mission. Instead, she'd stopped an espionage conspiracy, dismantled a black market network, arrested 3 foreign assets, and won an international shooting competition with equipment that most modern shooters considered obsolete. Not bad for a soldier who'd arrived with a damaged scope and a mission she couldn't discuss. At 0600 the next morning, a government vehicle arrived to transport her to the airfield. Kane was already in the vehicle. He nodded at her. No words needed. They rode in comfortable silence to where a military transport waited. Before boarding, Sierra looked back at the mountains, at the range where she'd made impossible shots, at the facility where she'd hunted enemies who'd thought they were safe, at Montana's sky that stretched blue and endless like a promise of something better ahead. She thought about iron sights, about fundamentals, about the difference between technology and skill. Technology could fail, equipment could break, batteries could die, but fundamentals, the core techniques drilled into muscle memory through thousands of hours of practice, those never failed. They were there in darkness and chaos. They were there when everything else fell apart. They were there when you needed them most. She boarded the transport, found a seat, secured her rifle case, and as the aircraft lifted off toward whatever mission waited in Syria, she closed her eyes and smiled. Iron sights had worked, fundamentals had won, and somewhere her father was proud. Old ways, new wars, same warrior spirit that had carried soldiers through every conflict in American history. The spirit that said technology was just a tool but skill was eternal. The spirit that said when your equipment fails, you adapt, you overcome, you complete the mission. Sierra Wolf carried that spirit, and she'd carry it into whatever came next. The Ghost was ready. I spent 3 days researching how elite snipers actually compete at this level, and what I found changed everything I thought I knew about modern marksmanship. The detail that haunts me most: when Sierra made that deliberate miss at 1,200 meters to send a signal in Morse code, that's tradecraft you can't learn from any manual. It's instinct earned through missions we'll never hear about. What moment hit you hardest? The iron sight's victory, or when she had to arrest the colonel who lost his son? Drop your thoughts below. And if you're here for more stories where old-school grit meets impossible odds, hit subscribe. Next week's story will surprise you.